The town of Plainfield, Wisconsin, was the kind of place where people left their doors unlocked and trusted their neighbors. No one would have suspected that beneath the quiet, lonely surface of a local handyman named Ed Gein lay something so monstrous, so horrifying that it would scar the town forever. When the truth finally came to light, it would shock the world and inspire some of the most terrifying horror characters in history. Ed Gein had a twisted childhood. He was born on August 27, 1906, into a life of isolation and control. His mother, Augusta Gein, was a devoutly religious woman who saw sin in every corner of the world, especially in women. She preached to her sons, Ed and his older brother Henry, that women, other than herself, were filthy and wicked. She forbade them from making friends and isolated them on their remote farm, cutting them off from outside influences. Ed adored his mother, obeying her every command, while his father, a weak and alcoholic man, was barely present. When his father died in 1940, Augusta tightened her grip even further. In 1944, Ed's brother Henry mysteriously died in a fire on the farm. Some suspected that Ed had killed him, as bruises were found on Henry's body, but without evidence, the case was never investigated. Ed later made odd, detached comments about his brother's death, further fueling suspicions. When Augusta passed away in 1945, after a series of strokes, Ed was devastated. She had been his entire world, and without her, he was utterly alone. He sealed off most of the house, keeping it as a shrine to his beloved mother, leaving her room untouched as if she would return. The rest of the house, however, became a decaying, filthy ruin, littered with rotting food, discarded newspapers, and broken furniture. And in the darkness of his loneliness, something inside Ed Gein began to rot. Ed spent his days doing odd jobs for the townspeople, but his nights were consumed by something far darker. Obsessed with death and the female body, he began frequenting local graveyards. Under the cover of night, he would dig up freshly buried bodies. Women who reminded him of his mother. He brought their remains back to his home, where he indulged in his gruesome craft. When police eventually searched his home, what they found was beyond comprehension. A mask made from a human face, its empty eyes staring into the darkness. A corset sewn together from the skin torso of a woman, its flesh eerily preserved. Leggings made from human flesh, tanned and stitched together with crude precision. A belt adorned with human nipples, each one carefully preserved and sewn in a grotesque fashion. Bowls made from human skulls, stacked neatly on shelves like fine china. Lampshades and chair coverings made from flayed human skin, their leathery texture stretching grotesquely over wooden frames. A collection of preserved noses, lips and ears, some stored in boxes, others tacked onto the walls. Ed was creating something horrific. A woman's suit, crafted from human skin, something he could wear to feel closer to his mother. He longed to become her, to bring her back in the only way his twisted mind could conceive. Though much of his horror came from grave robbing, Gein eventually took the next step: murder. Mary Hogan, the first victim, 1954. Mary Hogan, a tough-talking tavern owner with a striking resemblance to Augusta, vanished without a trace. Blood was found in her tavern, smeared across the floor, but there were no leads. Years later, when police entered Gein's home, they found her severed head in a paper bag, her face frozen in an eternal scream. When confronted, Gein casually remarked, "Oh, she's at my place right now." Bernice Worden, the final victim, 1957. On November 16, 1957, Plainfield's hardware store owner Bernice Worden disappeared. The last transaction in the store ledger was a sale to Ed Gein. When police arrived at his farmhouse, what they discovered would haunt them forever. Bernice's decapitated body hung upside down in the shed, split open like a deer, her legs splayed apart. She had been gutted, her insides removed with surgical precision. Blood had pooled beneath her, staining the dirt floor. Her head was later found in Gein's house, her face carefully preserved and mounted, as if it were a hunting trophy. Gein was arrested immediately. When questioned, he spoke with eerie calmness, admitting to grave robbing, the murders, and the grotesque things he had done with the bodies. He showed no remorse, only a childlike fascination with his own deeds. The town of Plainfield was thrown into hysteria. People who had once hired Gein to babysit their children recoiled in horror. Had he been hiding his madness all along, or had it slowly consumed him after his mother's death? Declared criminally insane, Gein was sent to Central State Hospital for the criminally insane, where he lived the rest of his life. Nurses described him as quiet, even polite, never showing any outward signs of aggression. He spent his days reading pulp horror novels and chatting with hospital staff, as if he were just another patient. He died on July 26, 1984, from respiratory failure. His grave in Plainfield Cemetery has been repeatedly vandalized, with pieces of his tombstone stolen by those obsessed with his legend. Ed Gein's crimes were so horrific that they inspired some of the most terrifying horror characters in cinema history. Norman Bates, Psycho, a man with an unhealthy attachment to his mother. Leatherface, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, a killer who wears masks made of human skin. Buffalo Bill, The Silence of the Lambs, a murderer obsessed with making a woman's suit out of human skin. Though Gein only confessed to 2 murders, his House of Horrors suggests there could have been more victims, ones whose names were never known. His story remains one of the most disturbing in true crime history. Despite Ed Gein's death, his gruesome crimes continue to haunt history and inspire horror fiction. His notorious legacy endures through films, books, and the chilling realization that real-life monsters can be more terrifying than any fictional character. Even though he spent the rest of his life in a mental institution, the horrors he committed left an indelible mark, making him one of the most infamous criminals in history. Even now, in the dead of night, when the wind whispers through empty fields and shadows stretch long, some say you can still hear the echoes of Plainfield's darkest secret. The butcher of Plainfield may be gone, but his notorious legend will never die.